Hello, everybody. This is Secular Sakai, and welcome to another week, day 822 of the illegal Muscovite invasion of the sovereign nation of Ukraine. We got a couple things we can talk about today. First and foremost, as the title of this video mentions, currently, total casualties in this war on the enemy side, the Muscovite side, have exceeded 500,000, which is a staggering amount. Let's see, who all do we have here in chat? I see Manu, Anna, Christy, The Real Dave Seaman, Mary M, Apatox, Ronnie Rankin. Welcome, everybody. And if you can hear me, give me a plus in chat. All seems to be good on my end. Now then, fundraiser is still going pretty well. We are at 11,319.35 hryvnia right now. I'm going to continue on with that. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump into a few news articles. Before we jump into the news, I have a video I would like to share with everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and just, share the whole thing, and also a link. I'm going to put the link to the video into the description. Oh, hold on. Let me pull that up, because I have the video ready, but I need to actually grab the link. All right, here we go. All right, so I've gone ahead and put that into the chat, and I'm also going to pull the video up on screen for us to watch right quick. And yeah, so essentially, there's someone who I'm acquainted with who runs another channel here on YouTube, Protect Ukraine Now. If you haven't checked them out already, definitely go subscribe. And he is doing a call to action regarding, well, I'll let him mention the rest, but for anyone who is an American, or if you know Americans who care about what's happening in Ukraine, it would be extremely helpful to be able to reach out to congressmen regarding additional support to the Ukrainian armed forces to help defend the region of Kharkiv. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and let him speak right now from Protect Ukraine Now.
Hello and welcome to Protect Ukraine Now YouTube channel. My name is Alek Kasman and I lead the efforts of this organization. Lately in the news, there's a lot of talk about allowing Ukraine to hit Russian assets with the US-made weapons. This article from Axios, posted a day ago, titled, "Let Ukraine Strike Targets in Russia with Weapons US Provided, Lawmakers Urge Biden." The Defense Department should allow Ukraine to use US-provided weapons on specific targets within Russian territory, a group of bipartisan representatives said in a letter on Monday. The Biden administration had banned the use of US-made weapons to strike inside Russia in an effort to keep the conflict from spreading. There's indeed a document addressed to Secretary Austin, urging him to authorize the use of US-provided weapons to strike targets within Russian territory under certain circumstances. This letter is also asking for additional training for F-16 pilots and for more air defense for Ukraine. This document is signed by Michael Turner, chairman of Committee on Intelligence, Jim Hems, ranking member of the House, and a lot of other Congress people. So why I'm showing this document, it is very clear that the US government is not a unique body, and we have a clear conflict between the administration and some of the members of the Congress. Moving on, Lithuanian foreign minister says Ukraine must be allowed to strike Russian territory with Western arms. Here's another article from Yahoo News. America ban on Ukraine using US supplied weapons to hit targets in Russia creates sanctuary for Putin army.
I'm just going to pause real quick to say I 100% agree with this. There shouldn't be a ban any longer, and that restriction does need to be lifted so Ukraine can openly use what it has been provided how it needs to be used.
The refusal by America and other countries in the West to allow weapons supplied to Ukraine to be fired at targets inside Russia is creating a sanctuary from where Vladimir Putin army can prepare and launch attacks, say military experts. So in this article, the problem is clearly exposed. Russia is able to accumulate their assets right across large cities like, for example, Kharkiv, and attack it from safety of their own territory, because Ukraine is not allowed to use US long-range weapons against those very much legit targets. Here's another article from CBC News. Ukraine has US weapons it can't use in Russian territory. Will that change? That's a great question, and I'm sure many of you would like to know the answer to this question as well. Yet, ABC News from a day ago reports Austin says expectation is Ukraine won't use US weapons outside its territory despite Russian advance. So obviously there's a difference in opinion between Secretary Austin and some of the Congress people. Now, why do I show you the news and talk about the disconnect between some fractions of the government? The thing is, Ukraine really needs your support. Cities like Kharkiv are hit very hard. And if we do not stop those blind bombs, if we do not stop attacks against Ukraine civilians and the military, the front line may collapse, the cities like Kharkiv may fall, and this is not something we want to see happen. What we can and should do is support US congressmen who stand for the right of Ukraine to defend itself, for the right of Ukraine to use US-made weapons against Russian assets, even if they're located on Russian Federation territory. Those Congress people need your help. They need to hear from you. They need to know they're doing the right thing. They need your support. Those Congress people who are still on the fence and they're not sure if they need to join the crowd that currently is pressing against Biden administration to provide those capabilities to Ukraine, they need additional encouragement. They, again, need your phone call. They need your letter. At Protect Ukraine Now, we have tried our best to help you as much as we could to make that phone call to your members of the Congress or send them a letter. You are looking at Protect Ukraine Now website. If you go to protectukrainenow.org and click on the Call to Congress link at the top, you're going to see a form that allows you to find your members of the Congress by entering your address. Down below, you can see a sample text of a message you should deliver to your members of the Congress. Here we show an example of what you could say. Obviously, you should feel free to use your own words or paraphrase the message you find below. However, feel free to just read it off the paper or your phone screen. There are several important issues to talk about. Number one is allow the use of US weapons to strike within the territory of Russian Federation. Another very important issue is stopping glide bomb attacks. They are a big problem for Ukrainian cities and front lines, and they can be taken care of with Patriot systems. Patriot Pack 2 or Pack 3 will do this job quite well, and we need to be asking for these air defense capabilities from the US government, in particular the Biden administration. They have the ability to send those weapons right away. You can also send a letter to your members of the Congress with the same ask. If you're not comfortable making phone calls, please go to the letter to Congress section and send a pre-written document where we explain in details of what needs to happen in order for Ukraine to mitigate the situation with air raids, glide bombs, and also we explain the need to allow Ukraine military to hit Russian assets with the US-made weapons. As we talked about many times on this channel, your participation is very important. Aside from attending rallies or sending donations to various organizations that help Ukraine, you should also call your representatives. You need to be in touch with them. They need to hear from you in order for them to act. Those members of the Congress who already support Ukraine, and as you can see, doing a lot to help current situation, they need your support. They need to know they're doing the right thing. They need to hear from their constituents. Those who are still undecided as well need that phone call. So again, please use our website. You can use any other resource to find the contact information for your members of the Congress. You can use your own words to request assistance for Ukraine. You don't need to use Protect Ukraine Now website. This is only yet another resource to make it easy for you to get in touch with your members of the Congress. We very much appreciate you taking the time to do so. Also, if you find this video important, please send it to your friends and family. Ukraine needs support right now, and your phone call is very important. Thank you very much.
All right. Tried to pause it before the recommended videos came up. Didn't quite catch it. But yeah, so that was Protect Ukraine Now. Please go check out their channel. The video, I put the link in the description earlier. And I'm also going to put a link to their website right now regarding ways to help make calls and assist with basically the situation and how to give protecting the front line. As he mentioned, regardless where you live in the world, it's important to take part in making calls, I would say. But especially if you're an American, this war's not over. It was fantastic, the last aid package that we were able to get through, but we got to keep going because the end is not in sight. It's not in sight yet, everybody. So thank you for standing with Ukraine, and thank you for listening to this brief PSA. All right, and there's the link in the chat right now. All right, with that, let's move on. All right, let me get the Oh, wait, is this not linked? Damn it. Okay, hold on. All right, one sec, everybody. All right, there we go. Excuse me. All right, so the first article, I'm putting it into chat and description right now. Oh, that is a long link. Hold on. What the heck? Is it really that long? Yeah, it is pretty long. Wow. Is this actually too long to put into the... I'm sure I can shorten it, but still. Wow, yeah. Okay. Hold on a sec. Yep, that works. Okay, this is actually too long, so we're gonna go ahead and just use a URL shortener for it, but it'll still work. Okay, so this first article is from Yahoo News. All right, and let's jump into it now. So, as Russian losses in Ukraine hit 500,000, Putin buries future demographic risks at home. According to Ukraine's general staff, over 500,000 Russian soldiers were either killed or wounded in Ukraine during the 27-month-long full-scale war. The staggering number is in line with the estimates of the UK and France. Oh, there we go. Which said earlier in May that the overall Russian losses are set to be around 500,000. We estimate Russian military losses at 500,000, 500,000, including 150,000 deaths or fatalities, French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourne said on May 3rd. Russia's aggression with little regard for the lives of its own soldiers is likely to continue, but behind the figure lies a potential demographic and economic time bomb that Russian President Vladimir Putin may not be able to ignore so easily. What are the latest figures? According to Ukrainian figures as of May 25th, Russia has lost 500,080 troops. The figures from the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces do not specify killed or wounded. The overall consensus is that it includes dead, wounded, missing, and captured. In February, President Zelensky said that 180,000 Russian troops had been killed since the start of the all-out war. The president said that over 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers were killed during the same time. Western officials gave similar estimates about Russian battlefield losses. Speaking to Russian independent newspaper Novaya Gazeta Europe, Séjourne said Russia's military failure is already apparent. Leo Docherty, British Minister of State for the Armed Forces, said in late April, the UK estimates Russian losses to be over 450,000. We estimate that approximately 450,000 Russian military personnel have been killed or wounded, and tens of thousands more have already deserted since the start of the conflict, Docherty said in Parliament. So this is something many of us have been watching as it's grown and gotten close to this point, and we are there now. And yeah, this is something, as it has been mentioned on this channel and other channels, Putin and his military, his government, they really don't care about Russian lives, about the lives of the soldiers who are fighting and invading Ukraine. It is a situation where they're willing to give, 500,000, a million, million and a half, large numbers for this pointless, fruitless campaign of theirs, which has been genocidal and horrific for Ukrainians, and has also, in the long term, very likely hurt the Russian Federation much more than any gains they would get from stolen land and other resources. So, yeah, this number will continue to climb, I'm sure. The list of the most significant single-day Russian losses since the start of the full-scale invasion in February 2022, 8 out of 10 of Russia's largest losses recorded by Ukraine's general staff were in May of 2024. Wow. So yeah, it's been, on a daily basis, heavy losses for the enemy this month in 2024. The number of personnel killed serving in Russian private military companies, PMCs, is not clear, he added. A U.S. estimate reported on December 12th put the total at 315,000. On the same day, the Ukrainian figure was 340,650. How accurate are the figures? Ukraine has published daily estimates of the number of killed and wounded Russian soldiers since the early days of the launch of the full-scale invasion. Initially, there was some skepticism about how accurate the numbers were, reflected in the fact Western nations were at first reluctant to publish their own numbers. At the start of the war, when I was in Moscow, we didn't speculate on numbers because there was a lot of propaganda flying around. John Foreman, CBE, the UK's former defense attaché in Moscow from 2019 to 2022, told the Kiev Independent. But it seems to me that over the last year and a half or so, the British, American, and Ukrainian estimates have all come together. Over the course of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine's Western allies did begin to publicly release their own estimates Russian losses of Russian losses, and they are broadly in line with those coming out of Kiev. Let's see. So I'm not going to go through the whole article. I'll let everybody go through and read it a bit, but I do want to go over some of the highlighted sections. Primarily, just how big are 500,000 losses? 500,000 killed and wounded is a huge figure, says Foreman. If confirmed, France's 150,000 figure of Russian troops killed is around 10 times higher than that suffered by the Soviet army during the decade-long war it fought in Afghanistan from 1979 until 1989. For comparison, the U.S. military lost around 102,000 soldiers killed in all the wars it fought since the end of World War II, including 58,220 during the Vietnam War. Yeah, and the UK suffered 750,000 military casualties, not just fatalities, during the 6 years of the Second World War. And Russia's losses show no signs of slowing. In fact, they've reached record levels in recent weeks. So, yeah, does the Kremlin care? Earlier this month, Putin appointed a new defense minister, with Andrei Belosov replacing the long-standing Sergei Shoigu. In a speech laying out his priorities for his new role, economist Belosov said his key task, of course, remains achieving victory. Yeah. At the same time, I want to specifically emphasize this: with minimal human loss, that is insulting to hear. Yeah. I'm sorry, screw Belosov. According to the Financial Times, Russia may be forced to launch a new mobilization wave by the end of 2024. Foreman also suspects that there is a far more callous calculation behind Belosov's statement. I don't think he's a particularly altruistic guy. He's not doing it for the lives of the soldiers, he says, adding, I think what he's indicating there is that the cost of the Russian government to the Russian government of all these killed and wounded is colossal. So, I mean, basically, the Russian military, Russian government does not care. The Kremlin does not care. They might care about the long-term standing implications, but at this point, I think they've just kind of shrugged and said, well, it is what it is. We'll deal with it. But morally, of course, they do not care. Now, will this... here we go. While the exact amount paid out is not known, Bloomberg estimated in a piece about soldier compensation payments last year that outlays for people in the military, including volunteers and those who were mobilized, may total around 1.1 trillion rubles, or $12 billion per year. And then there are the social costs. Rates of PTSD and alcohol and drug addiction among Russian soldiers returning home have surged, as well as murder and violent crime incidents involving veterans. It's a balance sheet calculation, Foreman says in reference to Belosov's comments. Obviously, now there are things like casualty compensation payments to families of dead and injured, the murder rate increased, an increase in PTSD, alcoholism, domestic violence, which are all linked to lots of people coming back wounded or traumatized from the front. Added to this are the inevitable labor shortages caused by men either fleeing the country to avoid serving in the army or being killed and wounded when they do. It all adds up to another demographic time bomb, which I think is going to blow its way through Russia in the next 10 to 20 years, says Foreman. Now, the big question that all of us really care about, let's see. Will it affect the war in Ukraine? Despite the horrific death toll, Russia appears to be still attracting recruits eager to sign up. According to the country's defense ministry, more than 100,000 men signed contracts to serve during the first 3 months of the year. Politically, Putin is fresh from another dubious election victory and shows no signs of abandoning his aims in Ukraine, but the longer-term picture for Russia is far from rosy, Foreman says. Putin's mortgaging his entire country's future for his war in Ukraine, he says. I think long-term calculations about Russia's long-term health and viability have been completely sacrificed. It doesn't matter, bizarrely, how much he's gone through, maybe half of all of the military's materiel, or 500,000 people, or all the long-term macroeconomic problems that have been sown. You've got the situation now where he has to win this. Russian leaders who lose wars end up faring badly, so he's all in, Foreman says. Now, if Ukraine can hang on after all the dithering and delay in Washington, deal with mobilization, sort out its training, and continue to bleed the Russian army, then I think there's a chance to bring the problem home to Russians. So, there you have it. From, let's see, the author here was Chris York. So, yeah, pretty good, I would say pretty good reporting, pretty good figures, as well as a bit of a opinion. You know, it's not a full opinion piece, but you can see his opinion laced throughout it. And yeah, I'd say pretty apt article on the current situation. All right, now let's go ahead and go to the next article. I'm going to check the comments first real fast to see what you guys' thoughts are. Yeah, the casualty rates for Russians have been consistently a good bit over 1,000 for a few days now. I've seen that as well, Greg. All right, and I think we're good on questions so far, so we'll move on to the next article. All right, I'm putting the link into the description and the chat. All right. From ABC News, Zelensky says Ukraine has taken back control in areas of embattled Kharkiv region. From Kiev, Ukraine, Ukrainian forces have secured combat control of areas where Russian troops entered the northeastern Kharkiv region earlier this month, President Volodymyr Zelensky said. Meanwhile, 2 people were killed Saturday in an aerial attack on the city of Kharkiv, which is the region's capital, according to local officials. Kharkiv is about 20 kilometers or 12 miles from the Russian border. Moscow's troops have in recent weeks captured villages in the area as part of a broad push, and analysts say they may be trying to get within artillery range of the city. Ukrainian authorities have evacuated more than 11,000 people from the region since the start of the offensive on May 10th. Our soldiers have now managed to take combat control of the border area where the Russian occupiers entered, Zelensky said in his nightly video address on Friday evening. Zelensky's comments appeared to be at odds with those made by Russian officials, but of course, I'm going to trust Ukrainian statements much more than anything from Russian officials. Viktor Vodolatsky, a member of Russia's lower house of parliament, said Russian forces now controlled more than half of the town of Vovchansk, 3 miles or 5 kilometers inside the border, Russian state news agency TASS reported Friday. Vovchansk has been a flashpoint for fighting since Russia launched the offensive in the Kharkiv region. Vodolatsky was also quoted as saying that once Vovchansk was secured, Russian forces would target the cities of Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and Pokrovsk in the neighboring Donetsk region. Independent confirmation of the claims wasn't immediately possible. Russia's Kharkiv push appears to be a coordinated new offensive that includes testing Ukrainian defenses in the Donetsk region further south, where Russia's defense ministry said Saturday that its forces had taken over the village of Arkhangelsk, while also launching incursions in the northern Sumy and Chernihiv regions. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the Kremlin's army is attempting to create a, quote, buffer zone in the Kharkiv region to prevent Ukrainian cross-border attacks. The Russian push is shaping up to be Ukraine's biggest test since Moscow's full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, with outnumbered and outgunned Ukrainian forces being pressed at several points along the about 1,000-kilometer or 620-mile front line that snakes from north to south in eastern Ukraine. Yeah, so... yeah, it's right where it's been for the last couple of weeks, guys, and it's intense. The Russians are trying very hard to create that buffer zone. Ukraine's doing a pretty good job of pushing back, though, from what I've seen with recent reports. In addition to the ground offensive operation along Ukraine's northeastern border, Russia is continuing to bombard the Kharkiv region with missiles, guided aerial bombs, and drones. Regional Governor Ole Sinyehubov said that 2 people were killed and 33 others wounded when an aerial bomb hit a large construction supplies store in the city of Kharkiv on Saturday afternoon, causing a huge fire to break out. He said that more than 200 people could have been inside the store, later noting that the fire had been contained. A second bomb hit the city's central park, Kharkiv Mayor Ihor Terekov said. Zelensky called the airstrike on the store a manifestation of Russian madness and appealed to Western countries to provide Ukraine with air defense systems. When we tell world leaders that Ukraine requires adequate air defense protection, we are literally talking about how not to allow such terrorist strikes, he said in a post on X. So, yeah, we continue to support Ukraine because, as mentioned here, Ukraine's problems have been mounting in recent months as it tries to hold out against its much bigger foe, and the war appears to be at a critical juncture. So, yeah, call your congressman. Continue to make donations. Those are very helpful to any, not just here, but anywhere. Any channel, any organization that's assisting Ukrainian soldiers that you know to be legitimate, that you trust, continue to assist them. Because, yeah, the war, it does continue on, everyone. And whether everything finishes with this war or we see this conflict like Crimea 10 years ago just stretch out into yet another war at some point, it all depends on how much support we can get to Ukraine. So let's keep pushing. All right. Let's see. Next article. From CNN by Nick Patton Walsh. Putin signals he's open to peace talks, but Ukraine is right to be wary. excuse me, Eastern Ukraine, CNN. Russian President Vladimir Putin signaling this week that he is open to peace talks should he be viewed with vast overshadowing caveats and the weight of Ukraine's and the West's past experience of Russian diplomacy. Friday saw a wealth of noise about negotiation. In the same month, Moscow launched a third invasion of Ukraine from the north of Kharkiv. And yeah, no, never trust Putler, because the man is a snake. We all know that. We all see that. Nah. I don't think there could be a peace deal that would be initiated by Russia. There shouldn't be any peace deal. But if there ends up being anything like a ceasefire, then Ukraine would have to be the one to introduce it. Yeah, the bottom line is this war is going to continue onward. But the fact that Russia is trying to signal that they'd be open to peace talks, let me tell you this. Russian logic, Russian psychology, for the most part, runs along Russian lines. And I can tell you for certain within Putin's inner circle, his cabinet, there are probably those who saw this as an act of weakness. So, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. And it shows that Russia is desperate to try to pause this war or end it so they can rebuild their strength so they can then conduct another war, either again in Ukraine or somewhere else in the world, because they have plenty of places where the current Russian military wants to have campaigns. Or at the very least, hybrid warfare operations. Friday saw a wealth of noise about negotiation. In the same month, Moscow launched a third invasion of Ukraine from the north of Kharkiv. The Reuters news agency cited 4 sources in a report from 2 deeply experienced and connected Russia reporters that Moscow was willing to consider peace talks which would freeze the current Russian occupation of about a fifth of Ukraine. Putin responded to that report by suggesting Russia was willing to talk peace based on earlier agreements. He hinted at an aborted deal in Istanbul just after the war began in 2022, which fell apart mostly because Moscow's forces were still rampaging across Ukrainian territory, and massacres around Kiev had come to light. The idea floated in the Reuters report would stop short of Moscow's stated goal of capturing all of eastern Donetsk, but also eradicate Kiev's insistence it should not surrender any territory. The context of Putin's remarks was key. They came during a visit to Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko, something which in the past occurred moments before the Kremlin used Belarusian territory for military moves into Ukraine, while on Friday took place during joint tactical nuclear weapons drills between the two countries. Putin was talking peace with a backdrop that was anything but. Putin questioned the legitimacy of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, whom Moscow has repeatedly assailed after Kiev had to delay elections because of the very war Putin started. At the same time, there were unconfirmed reports that the private jet of former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych had landed in Belarus. The pro-Russian Yanukovych fled Ukraine in 2014 after forces loyal to him shot dead dozens of protesters in central Kiev. The mere possibility of his presence while Putin and Lukashenko met led to speculation Moscow was again hoping to engineer the return of a proxy to power in Ukraine. Guys, keep this in mind. If you are not following domestic Ukrainian politics, it is a lot happening internally in Ukraine. And there absolutely is a strong desire from the Kremlin, from Belarus, from both Putin and Lukashenko to find a way to install another Yanukovych, to find a way to topple the current Ukrainian government and install a puppet who would be compliant or open to being, quote unquote, friendlier with the Kremlin. They aren't stopping. Whether it's, attempting to influence and infiltrate and rig Ukrainian elections, or assassination attempts, or trying to find a way to sow discord and, create some kind of opposition, political or otherwise, from inside of Ukraine that would divide the country during this time of war. Russia Moscovia is not above any of that. And I'm certain all of that is in play right now. Because if they could achieve that, it would make the enemy's life a lot easier, which is why that cannot be allowed. The Kremlin's less brutal goal in Ukraine, short of full or partial occupation, has involved a president in Kiev it considers loyal who will stop the country's march towards the European Union and NATO. It was fanciful before the 2022 invasion and came up during the aborted 2022 Istanbul talks. But now it would likely need an occupying Russian force to impose it on a population seething at the Kremlin's brutality. And also, I want to add to this, it's not just Ukraine. There have been, for a while now, a couple of months, but definitely within the last year, we've seen the buildup of the Polish military. We've seen several other countries. Of course, we've seen Finland and Sweden joining NATO. Europe is on a path to prepare for war again because of Vladimir Putin and his foolish actions. So, to call it a miscalculation, not just with regards to Ukraine, but the whole of Europe, is an understatement. European powers are not fools. They are familiar with Russian history and their own history. They're familiar with who and what Putin is. So yeah, this is as we see things unfold, just keep in mind that this is not something that's going to be forgiven anytime soon by the current generation of Ukrainians and surrounding allies in Europe. So why the talk of peace? Particularly when Russia appears to be having its most successful moment on the front lines in months, if not since the invasion. Diplomacy has always been a military tool for, I like how this is worded, a military tool for the Kremlin. That's actually very important to highlight. It talked peace over Syria in 2015 as their jets pounded civilians in rebel-held areas. It talked peace in 2015 with Ukraine while Russian troops and their proxies were in the throes of a full assault against the strategic Ukrainian town of Debaltseve. It is not cynical to distrust Russia's sincerity when it negotiates, but a practical necessity. Experience shows it considers talks worth pursuing in case they unexpectedly produce a useful outcome without violence, or give their opponent cause for pause in fighting to try and encourage a deal. Moscow may also be talking peace again now for two reasons. Firstly, Ukraine and its allies are convening a peace summit in Switzerland in June, where it will discuss without Russia what sort of deal it might accept. It is likely aimed at building momentum for an off-ramp the Kremlin can take when its forces are finally militarily exhausted or in a stalemate. Zelensky has said he hopes China, Russia's most potent ally but only partial supporter in the Ukraine war, will attend. Putin may be talking peace now to suggest to Beijing to not be involved in diplomacy about Russia without Russia present. There is little serious chance the Switzerland summit will end the war, but it might concretize minds in the West as to how serious a threat Moscow poses to an actual peace deal by laying out the bones of what damage Ukraine might have to absorb to its territorial integrity to stop the bloodshed. Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, said Friday that Putin's hints at peace talks were directly aimed at sabotaging the summit. Putin currently has no desire to end his aggression against Ukraine, he wrote on X, adding, "This is why he is so afraid of the Switzerland summit." Secondly, and most importantly, Putin is messaging governments in the West and the current American presidential campaign. He is trying to opaquely suggest, perhaps to populists in Europe or MAGA Republicans in the United States, that a simple deal is in hand, one in which front lines, on which Ukraine is currently losing with significant casualties, according to CNN, can suddenly freeze. Well, according to this author. I wouldn't say it's a lose-win situation right now on either side. I would say it's a very fluid. Both sides have specific goals that they're trying to achieve, and neither one is capable of achieving what they want in its entirety. Unfortunately, I wish that Ukraine were able to push Russia out right now. We all do. Western support for the war is costly and increasingly unpopular amongst, I wouldn't say increasingly unpopular, although this is a sweeping statement for multiple countries, I guess. There's still strong support for Ukraine in the U.S. among those who are paying attention. It's mostly just MAGA Republicans who are strongly opposed. Although the recent $61 billion passed by Congress has perhaps given the issue a reprieve from being at the mercy of electoral opinion for about a year. The Reuters report permits those in the West who want to see an end to the war to believe the Kremlin could stop the war as it stands immediately. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov made the report sound like it reflected Russia's permanent position, but ultimately it may sound new and interesting to key Western figures. Donald Trump, who has failed to explain how he would enact his claim he could stop the war in 24 hours, and other NATO members who are less bullish than France, the UK, and the Baltic states about the need to never trust Russia at the negotiating table. I would say the further you get away geographically from the borders of Muscovia, the fake federation, the more you find people who want to, countries and governments who are more willing to or have the experience of playing politics with Russia going back centuries to the times of the Russian Empire. Those who are right next to Russia understand, no, that's those political games always have pawns that are sacrificed, and none of us are going to be those pawns. I trust the Baltic voices, the anti-Putin Polish voices, the voices of those who are acutely aware of what Russian aggression is, much more than those who would dither about it in certain Western countries. Putin is a pragmatist. He started the war thinking it would be easy. He continued it thinking his tolerance for pain, autocratic security, and patience for victory would triumph. He might be right just now. He now sees a moment of electoral weakness in the U.S. and other European states, which he has met with a vague, opaque signal that there might be a time for diplomacy. It will likely gain some traction among those who desperately hope the war in Ukraine will just go away and who are less mindful of the existential threat a victorious and hyper-militarized Moscow poses to NATO's eastern members. But it should be viewed through the lens of the deep cynicism of Moscow's earlier diplomacy in Syria and Ukraine, used as a time to ferociously pursue the same military objectives, but with the illusory backdrop that peace might be just around the corner. Highly agreed. I highly agree with that statement. Everyone wants peace, but there can't be peace while Putin and his cronies are in power. There just can't. It would be not just foolish, but fatalistic for future generations of Europeans within NATO countries, especially the eastern flank of NATO, to believe that negotiations with Putin are possible in good faith. All right, now then, let's go ahead and I've got one more article here. We'll jump to that in a sec, but first, I'm going to go ahead and check chat and everything. All right. Let's see. Russia always lies. Yep, I agree with that, Martin. Want peace? Get out of Ukraine? Absolutely. Agree with that too, Cheryl. Greg Watkins, I did see on another platform that this peace summit has great concern for the Kremlin. Yeah, let me add to that also. Excuse me. I think a big part of the reason why Russia is so afraid of the peace summit, particularly because it doesn't include Russia and isn't centered around paying attention to Russia, is the fact that they only want to use negotiations as a political tool. And guess what? The other side can do that as well. Ukraine and the West can use it as a political tool as well. Because, a peace talk negotiation without Russia, of course, can't actually be a peace talk negotiation, but it can be something that signals, hey, We're still paying attention to this. We're still going to continue to support Ukraine in this, and it'll be on our terms, not yours, Russia. So it's kind of flipping the bird politically to Russia. And also, I think there might be a paranoia in Russia that a peace summit without them as a tool could be used similar to how they want to, where, there would be ideal terms for Ukraine, and then Ukraine, there'd be a ceasefire or an end to the conflict temporarily. Then Ukraine would build up power and push back to retake territory at some point when it would be politically inconvenient for Moscow. So I think there's some fear on their side that what they plan to do could be done by Ukraine and Ukraine's allies. I personally don't see. I would love for that to happen, but given the pattern we've seen with Western allies supplying weapons and aid to Ukraine, I don't see that happening specifically. I think it would be more along the lines of, I think it's more of a political tool that's being used, but also that paranoia in Russia, them being afraid of that, that is still important to keep in mind. Ukraine has done damn well with less personnel in total numbers and utilizing brand new cutting edge equipment quite well. So yeah, Ukraine can domestically build its forces quite well, I think, under the right scenario, given the right opportunity. In any case, all right, let's move on to one more article. Then we'll do a bit of an update on the front lines with Juzzy. And then I'm going to close out the stream because I have to go take care of a few more things. All right, first things first. Well, let's go to this article, putting it in chat and description now. All right. U.S. U.S. sending military aid to Ukraine to help repel Russia's assault near Kharkiv. Again, from CNN. The United States is sending $275 million in military assistance to Ukraine as part of efforts to help Ukraine repel Russia's assault near Kharkiv, Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced Friday. The top U.S. diplomat said the new tranche of assistance contains urgently needed capabilities for Ukrainian troops as they fight to hold back Russia's advances toward the key northeastern city. We will move this new assistance as quickly as possible so the Ukrainian military can use it to defend their territory and protect the Ukrainian people, Blinken said in a statement. In a post on X Friday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed his gratitude for the new aid package, saying it is critical right now as the enemy intensifies attacks along the front line. Today in Kharkiv, I witnessed firsthand the importance of strengthening our warriors in order to protect our people, our cities, and our communities. Freedom is the value both of our nations hold dear. To protect it, we require continued strong support from the United States and other allies, Zelensky wrote. Russian forces have advanced toward Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, after launching a surprise cross-border assault in mid-May. 7 people were killed in a barrage of Russian missile strikes Thursday. Ukrainian forces have been forced to contend with weapon shortfalls as they fight to hold off the advances. CNN journalists in the town of Liptsi, around 20 miles north of Kharkiv city, saw troops using aging and inadequate weaponry in an attempt to repel highly equipped Russian units bolstered by drones. So the push near Kharkiv, yeah, Russia is really, really pushing. And of course, both sides have situations where soldiers are having to use whatever weaponry, whatever equipment they can get their hands on. But again, I think this is a bit fatalistic or a little pessimistic. Ukraine is receiving aid now and is using that aid to concentrate repelling the Russians near Kharkiv. More does need to be done, but aid is arriving. The latest U.S. military assistance package, the fifth since the passage of a multi-billion-dollar national security funding package, includes artillery rounds, Javelin and TOW missiles, ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, or HIMARS, demolitions, munitions, anti-armor mines, tactical vehicles, and body armor, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear protective equipment, Blinken said. The top U.S. diplomat traveled to Ukraine last week to reaffirm the U.S. support to Zelensky and other top Ukrainian officials after the passage of that national security supplemental. We are determined that Ukraine win this war and succeed for its people and for its future, Blinken said at a press conference alongside Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. We're committed to making sure that Ukraine has the equipment it needs to succeed on the battlefield. However, the U.S. has continued to say its weapons cannot be used by Ukraine to strike Russian targets on Russian territory, although that may be changing. As I believe it was mentioned earlier that, actually, I don't think I pulled up an exact article, but there's been talk about changing that rule. Or that stipulation, rather, I should say, from the U.S. government side. Meanwhile, let's see. All right. Yeah, so that may change, but up until recently, probably still currently, because it hasn't changed just yet, we have not encouraged or enabled strikes outside of Ukraine, Blinken reiterated last week. Meanwhile, G7 finance ministers are meeting in Italy to discuss plans to marshal Russian assets that were frozen overseas at the outset of the war toward Ukraine's defense and reconstruction, according to people familiar with the matter. The plan, if finalized, would see U.S. and European banks redirect tens of billions of dollars in proceeds from Russian investments toward Ukraine, providing a critical financial lifeline as the continued political wherewithal by Ukraine's major benefactors remains uncertain. So, yeah. And that's where it stands right now. There's a bit more aid, a few $100 million more coming from the U.S. soon. But yeah, really, it would be fantastic if Ukraine could get more personnel, like actual soldiers, into Ukraine from allied nations. I know that's something a lot of people are very concerned about, but it really would help make all the difference, I think. It really would make a difference. All right, now, let's see here. Let's go ahead and get a bit of an update about what's happening at the front lines from Juzzy. One sec. Also, as a reminder, please keep in mind that in the upper right, if you want to donate to our fundraiser for the 110th Mechanized Brigade, you can do so using PayPal, or you can also do so in the lower left for our fundraiser to support soldiers using Anton's Buy Me a Coffee link. Or also, it just disappeared right now, but if you wish to support the channel, so I can be able to make more videos and basically just put more, be able to put more into the channel sometime soon, consider becoming a member or making a donation on the, I should make it blue. Right now it's red and black up there, but the blue Buy Me a Coffee, which is, that one popping up right now, which helps to support the channel. Also, on top of that, beyond donations and memberships, if anyone is interested in assisting with running the channel, as in, I don't know, co-hosting or just in general assisting with different planning, scheduling, really running the channel. That way I'm not doing it all completely alone. Feel free to reach out because, I could be open to that. Just so that we can get more video, more content, collaboration. It's great working with people when you're working with the right people. In any case, let's see here. All right, let me center this. There we go. And let me get it ready to play. Oh. Is that not in full screen? Oh, it is in full screen. That was weird. Okay, anyway.
Day 820 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is a super quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So, starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 498,000 military personnel losses. And given the daily loss rates, like today at 1,240, we know what that means for tomorrow. Then, as for hardware losses, 13 tanks, 27 APVs, 42 artillery, 3 multiple rocket launchers, 56 tin cans, and 1 Su-25 aircraft, again. So we'll...
Just want to comment, this is from a day ago, so right before it exceeded 500,000 casualties. But yeah, as you can see, what I really like about Juzzy's updates is he takes what the Soviet stockpile was for certain key combat vehicles and equipment, tanks, armored combat vehicles, and artillery, and really gives you an idea of exactly where it's at. Artillery at 86%, and you know they lost 42 in the last 24 hours when this update was put up. That's pretty significant. You know, these, like, when these start reaching 90%, I'm sure they're going to have to start getting more from someone, either from China or from domestic production or something. But yeah, once you start running through all of that, getting to 95%, that's going to be pretty crazy. Even on a wartime economy, the strain on Russia domestically to be trying to produce things in these quantities to fill this war, the needs for this war are insane. So hopefully we see those numbers jump up another 10, another 15, 20 percentage points across the board.
Head across to the map today, and starting out in Crimea, as explosions rocked the night in the peninsula, as Russian reports emerged from Simferopol, Sevastopol, Saki, Alushta, and a few others, with, for instance, a video surfacing depicting an explosion in Alushta, with at least 5 detonations reported. And in that particular video, we heard the Ukrainian citizens in occupied Crimea laughing at the missile strikes, with that one reportedly to be on a Russian military base. So, as you can see, no matter how many flags you put on your semicircle rotunda on the left there, it doesn't look like you're gonna win hearts. Also, Russian Telegram channels were blowing up, stating a massive combined strike from Ukrainian-operated ATACMS missiles, and even they mentioned the Rs-360 missiles, which are the in-house or Ukrainian-produced Neptune missiles. So this most recent series of incidents follows previous attacks in the region, for instance at the Belbek airfield, pretty much 3 days in a row, where resulting images showed us the loss of a number of Russian aircraft. But as for this latest event, we're sure to see definitely a lot more upcoming footage or videos of what exactly happened, with the amount of devastation that has seemed to have been caused on the Russian military. Then we'll head a bit further north on the map as intense battles rage in the north of the Kharkiv Oblast still, as Russian troops find themselves mired in the streets of Vodchansk, as the Russian forces continue to take heavy losses, which is either implied or flat out stated by either side now. And so far, despite deploying reserves, the Russian offensive has lost its steam, or not presenting any additional and observable traction right now, with Ukrainian defenses holding fairly firm. But take that with a grain of salt, if you will, although reportedly, where the fighting extends to Lipsy, some Russian social media channels have reported that the Russian army has switched gears here to active defenses, with mining the area and targeting Ukrainian positions. Then headed a bit further southeast on the map today, as briefly we head to the Terny direction once again, as 6 Russian assaults were repelled at Terny and Torsk in the past day. All as the location continues to seem to put on display for the Russian forces just how much of a bridge too far it really is. with that turn of phrase, in fact, being quite an accurate military expression for the situation, dating back to the Allied forces' offensive operations in World War II. Then, somewhere in the east, we will take a look now on the map as, okay, so starting off, we saw a Swedish-supplied Archer artillery system in Ukrainian service that continues to prove to be effective in the counter-battery role, seen here hunting down and destroying multiple Russian towed howitzer positions. Then, also in the east, due to coordinates provided by the Ukrainian-operated Shark UAV, which is a long-range recon drone, led to HIMARS strikes being successful in taking out a Russian Zytel electronic warfare complex. Then, in a similar fashion, Ukrainian soldiers from the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade attacked a Russian 240mm self-propelled howitzer, the Tulpan, quite a heavy hitter in the Kharkiv region. So, as you see here, 1 scout drone and 1 FPV drone. Then also...
Very important, given everything that's happening in Kharkiv. So, good work to the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade.
We continue to see high-quality counter-battery fire by Ukrainian artillery brigades in the eastern direction. And I want to make a point of this because we're seeming to come across more and more of this type of footage now, as it pertains to successful artillery shelling onto enemy positions at an increased rate than we have seen before in the recent past, which does tend to indicate the shell ammunition resupplies are trickling through. Then also in the east again, we saw a Russian T-64 tank getting destroyed in the upper Luhansk region. But not to be outdone, and then for some good measure, we also saw another Russian T-72 tank get destroyed as well. And so we're seeing a decreased incidence rate or decline in the destruction of such a tank variant, the T-72. Which is a relevant point to bring up here because they are the tank variant that Russia has the most of or had the most of. In fact, I have a lot of stats on that subject and I might do a small piece on that soon as well. Then headed across to some news for today. So the first batch of Ukrainian pilots have graduated from F-16 training at an Arizona military base, which is a crucial step towards putting the capable jets into Ukrainian airspace.
That is very important, and yeah, that is one thing that hasn't been discussed quite as much recently in the news that I'm glad is a little under the radar. Getting those jets safely into Ukraine, the logistics to support their use, and pilots trained on them very well. It obviously there's no one single thing that is going to be a full game changer for this war. There's no magic bullet for either side, but this would help Ukraine a lot, not just in this war, but with long-term aerial defense.
And this latest update also comes just after the training completion of maintenance crews from just a few days earlier. So combining these two pieces of news, this is all really starting to set the framework for getting those jets operational into Ukraine. Then in some more news, Norway announced a new military assistance package worth approximately $190 million for Ukraine. This latest contribution, made through the International Fund for Ukraine, or the IFU, will bolster Ukraine's air defense and naval capabilities, radar, anti-drone systems, and boats. So the IFU, collectively financed by the UK, the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Lithuania, oh, and Iceland too, can't forget them, underscores the unified effort to support Ukraine in its ongoing struggle. Then in some more news, the United States is set to bolster Ukraine's military with a fresh tranche of aid worth $275 million, as reported by the Associated Press, citing American officials. This contribution is said to include more of the highly effective HIMARS installations, along with the 105 and 155mm artillery shells for the armed forces of Ukraine. And so this latest package marks the fourth installment of US military assistance since Congress passed a bill supporting Ukraine just a month ago. Then headed across to a couple of Russian economy news segment updates. So in a retaliatory move, Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a decree authorizing the confiscation of assets belonging to US citizens and companies as compensation for Russian assets seized by the United States.
quick PSA to really just anyone listening, whether you're American or not, keep yourself and your money, if you are from a democratic, Western or not, if you are from Europe, if you're from Canada, the US, Mexico, Japan, South Korea, if you come from a democratic nation that is either actively assisting Ukraine or has remained relatively, or has on paper, remained neutral regarding this conflict, just stay out of Russia. Keep yourself and your money and your loved ones outside of Russia.
So this latest action comes in response to the recent approval of the Repo Act by the US Congress, which would allow the Biden administration to seize Russian assets held in American banks and redirect them to Ukraine. And with an estimated $300 billion in Russian assets immobilized by Western countries, including around $5 billion in the US, the decree enables Russian entities to appeal to courts regarding the unjustified seizure of their assets, with the Russian government potentially offering US assets in Russia as compensation. So, since Putin can't afford to keep the oligarchs' fortunes in good stead, which is something we've learned about prior, so instead he's looking to reappropriate existing assets within Russia so as to quieten the tumultuous waters that is the hierarchical structure of the Russian oligarchy. Now, a lot of this turns out to be great news for Western countries and Ukraine, as Putin has just gone the whole hog and legitimized these types of actions globally. Which ultimately means Western countries will no longer just look to siphon off profits derived from the base frozen Russian assets, as instead they'll sooner or later take the whole 300 billion cake, if you will, which will therefore only seek to help make Putin aid in funding a war against himself. And so this reminds me of when Putin erroneously spoke of the Patriot air defense systems before their first delivery into Ukraine and said something like, "They're old technology junk, just let them come." And they came, and junk they were not, being very successful against Russia's most propagandized super weapon missiles. And look where we are now. Russian physicists are going to jail because of it. The circle of life. Then into some more economy-related news, Rosneft, Russia's state-controlled oil giant, has appealed to the Kremlin for tax breaks to offset the mounting costs of protecting its own refineries from Ukrainian drone strikes. So in a letter to the Russian Prime Minister, Mishustin, Rosneft's CEO, Igor Sechin, reportedly a close ally of President Vladimir Putin, highlighted the necessity of implementing extensive and expensive measures to safeguard oil facilities against the increasing Ukrainian drone air incursion risks. And most recently, the company has been forced to suspend operations at several refineries, including Syzran and Ruzzian, Kubyshev and Tuapse, due to the attacks, which have targeted Russia's oil industry, and furthermore targeted a crucial pillar of its war funding efforts for Ukraine. And the Rosneft CEO also noted that Western sanctions have hindered efforts to modernize the refineries, limiting equipment supplies and driving up logistics and construction costs. Moreover, the drone strikes have successfully pressured Russia's fuel supplies, causing gasoline and diesel prices to surge for Russian consumers, undermining a key source of Moscow's counted-on tax revenue. So the strained Russian energy giants are clearly living under some crippling economic conditions, with quite the worrisomely worded letter to the Russian PM on this. But hey, maybe this story relates to the previous news piece, where Putin will hand over the keys to some of these frozen Western production facility assets held within Russia, just as some useless attempt to actually resolve a much deeper-seated issue at hand for Russia, which of course is their inherently botched invasion of Ukraine. Then we'll head across to some...
Just want to quickly say, anything that is targeting the Russian economy, especially their oil, love to see it. And also, reminder to everyone, wherever you live in the world, Be sure to check. I won't name any companies in particular to avoid their legal departments trying to tear me apart, which I'm sure could happen. Naming, certain companies specifically, but you know where to find them. There should be one that's been in the chat, a link for a list of Russian companies, a list of companies around the world still doing business in or with Russia. Don't do business with them. There are various different products, including food and drink products, including restaurants, among many, many other things that I do not support with my money because they still do business with Muscovite. All right, let's finish this video out.
Purge news, as the Russian military is undergoing a significant upheaval as arrests and dismissals of high-ranking officials continue, with rumors suggesting a campaign against Defense Minister Shoigu and his allies. Shoigu's chief of staff and press secretary have resigned, while a close associate faces accusations of fraud, and speculations also mount that evidence is being gathered against Shoigu himself, with Putin likely aware of the developments. Also, General Gerasimov, Russia's top military commander, may also face removal, following a similar pattern of criminal cases against his deputies and inner circle. And do note, as it stands, we have only seen Gerasimov once every 3 months if we're lucky. He was also nowhere to be found at the annual military parade just 2 weeks ago, which is a bit suspicious to say the least. So this purge we see playing out, likely driven by power struggles within the Kremlin, think of it as the minion factions, appears to signal a significant restructuring of Russia's military leadership amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. The Great Russian Purge. Although, it does occur to me there's only one such purging required, to make everybody else's problems go away. Then headed across to a couple of quick funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So, a drone was seen carrying a Ukrainian flag in Russia's St. Petersburg region, as it ended up getting stuck on the electricity lines. And I'm not sure if that was by design or not, but it's actually a great place for it to end up, and more difficult to get down at a moment's notice. I wonder how long it will stay up there. Then as for a quick funny to round it off with today, guys, so remember Russia's murky threat posted on their Interior Ministry website to unilaterally change maritime borders in the Baltic Sea and the Gulf of Finland? Well, after some well-justified international outrage, they withdrew the statements from their website the very next day. So I do wonder, but Russia may have momentarily forgot, during all of their mafia-style bullying that they do, that Finland, for instance, is now a part of NATO. Not a great plan. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again.
Yeah. Well, retracting that statement, that also definitely does not look good, I'm sure, domestically. Or internationally. It looks very cowardly and childish. So I think we all expected that, but kind of funny to see nonetheless.
Thanks for watching. Please continue to like and comment and subscribe, all of the above and more. Thanks again for the support so much. I really do appreciate it. You'll never know how much, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.
Be sure to here we go. Be sure to check out Ukraine News TV. And yeah, check out Juzzy and his channel. He's at a little over 100,000 subscribers. He does great work. Love his updates. And he's also got Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon. So, yeah. Show some love to Juzzy and go check out his channel. All right. And I made my donation to the fundraiser for today right quick. If anyone wants to join, feel free to do so. On the right. That one, PayPal donations, and lower left, Buy Me a Coffee to Anton. Those, again, go towards supporting the 110 FPV drones initiative that we will continue to push forward with. All right. With that, I do have one more thing actually I want to cover. Hold on one sec. Let me pull this up. Yes. Yeah, you know what? How do I want to go about doing this? Let's do it. Let's do it like this. Just to be quick and convenient with what I've already got set up. Although it won't be completely full screen. Just want to give a reminder to everybody. Yeah, it'll be a little bit. Yeah, a little off center. But be sure to check out. Oh, shoot. Clicked the wrong thing on accident. Come on. There we go. Be sure to check out the shills. There's going to be a we're going to be on here in about 30 minutes. Starsky, Georgie, Greg, and Slavi, who several of you may remember was, if you've been watching multiple channels, I believe that she was on with Rick last week. Or was it Rick's channel or was it Eric Rice, the European Resilience Initiative? I believe it was on Rick's channel actually. Oh yeah, that's right. No. Anyway, be sure to go check out the shows at 2 o'clock. We'll all be coming together as we do every week, and it should be a pretty good show, pretty good update. Oh, there's no video playing yet, just the countdown. But yeah, in about 30 minutes, go check that out, everybody. All right, thanks for joining, and have a great day. Slava Ukraini. All right, bye, everybody.